Their governments are trying to take freedoms every single day. Bitcoin is the one thing that starts to give those freedoms back to us because it's something that they can't control. I think it's scaring them. We have had this constant struggle of power where we have a ruling class and we have the ruled. So we have this group of people that is completely subjected to the will of a ruler. So in Bitcoin we say rules without rulers. For most of our existence as humans, we've lived in this system where we've had this kind of two-tier or multi-tier system where somebody's at the top. And in most of the places on this earth, that is the case. And I would even argue, that's a big part of how we live in, the United States today under our government. I think it has way too much control and power. And I think this is the case everywhere, at least right now. We live in a time and in a place where we have the luxury of not needing to think about war every day. There are places in the world where that's all they get to think about is war because it's on their doorstep. We have taken our war other places. I certainly think Bitcoin is a great equalizer for that. I think that it will diminish the efficacy of war over time. It makes war essentially more unaffordable. And I think people are just sheltered from the fact that war exists, and there needs to be some form of equalizer to allow us to compete with one another. Because if we don't have Bitcoin, then we have to exert our force in other manners, physical force, rather than hash force.
I just try to keep it conversational. I haven't prepared any questions. It's more like try to learn about, I guess, how you found it and you found Bitcoin and how I guess you see it and what it means to you and all these things. And I guess maybe the first question is, what we can get us started is, what was that turning point for you? Like from seeing it, from hearing about it, from I guess being exposed to it for the first time, to that process of studying it, or how was it for you from the moment that you heard until you were like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense?
I think my journey is probably pretty similar to a lot of people, in that it wasn't like a one-day journey. It was a series of multiple little steps. I think rewinding the clock all the way back to my first interaction or exposure actually came through Ethereum, believe it or not. It was an article that I was reading about proof of work. I hadn't heard about Bitcoin at this point, but I saw an article that was advertised, and it was basically just going over what proof of work was, and it blew my mind. And so that was kind of what started my journey. And at that point, I just immediately rushed home from work. I was working as a firefighter at the time, overseas, on a deployment in the military. And I got off my shift and I did as much research as I could in a short period of time. And I bought Bitcoin and some other altcoins. At this point, it was part of my learning journey. I didn't know, I didn't know what the signal was for a while, but that was part of my progression in my learning journey. Eventually, I started off from this like technological focus where I realized, proof of work was going to fundamentally change the world, and also from more of like an investment perspective, because I was like, okay, how do I capitalize on this, new revolution, and so that's kind of where I started. And over time, I gradually figured out that what was happening was much bigger than just a technological revolution. It was also a liberation revolution as well. And so I would say my journey is kind of one that starts from a number go up perspective, and eventually I found freedom go up through the process, and that became much more important to me over time. And so that's kind of where I am today in trying to focus most of my efforts on the freedom side of Bitcoin, mostly because I think number go up is more of just a byproduct of Bitcoin existing. Not that it's guaranteed or it's a given, but I think at this point, with all of the tailwinds that we have, it's very unlikely that anything's going to stop Bitcoin, at least in the long term. I don't want to make it sound like, we should just, give up trying to orange pill people and not tell people about Bitcoin, because I think that there's certainly an element of making sure that Bitcoin is good for us. And by that, I mean, we want Bitcoin to be good for us here and now. There's no guarantee that Bitcoin is going to do what we want it to do or need it to do in the short term, in the immediate vicinity of where we live, because we have governments and other forces that might try to take that from us. So it's important in my mind. I'm a big proponent of using Bitcoin to in a sly roundabout way replace some of the power structures that are existing, rather than just kind of sitting on it and doing nothing. Because I don't think that is. I'm not worried about Bitcoin. I am worried about our our governments and the countries that we live in, because that can definitely have a huge impact on our lives. One of the things that I say is, nobody can necessarily break Bitcoin. The government can't stop Bitcoin, but the government can stop you from benefiting from Bitcoin. So yeah, that was kind
Proof
of
of work. I can build on that. That's great, man. Proof of work was also like one of the things that clicked for me. Like when I started reading, it was rough for me to trust any central authority. Since school, I just didn't like authority. I struggled, a power struggle with my dad, who was authoritative and very like strict, and I gravitated towards Bitcoin because of proof of work, knowing that math, you can't really trick math, and you can't trick physics, and that combination was it that really connected it for me. You said you were in the military. Have you read Softwar, the book by what's his name?
Jason Lowry.
Jason Lowry.
I have not read it cover to cover. I'm quite familiar with the thesis. Everything that I have read, I have mostly agreed with. In fact, probably more so than most people give it credit for. Of course, I've got a military background as well, so I have that lens to look through. I think when he was when he'd first written his thesis and made it public, it got a lot of backlash, and I think a lot of that is just due to a lack of understanding of how the world works. I think people were, offended by it almost, where they were more offended by the truth of war, right? Because I mean, the book is framed through this lens of reality, right? And in first world nations, we tend to live in our bubbles, and we like to pretend that all of this, real conflict doesn't exist. And so I think that's where a lot of the pushback came from, was, his viewpoint on how Bitcoin fits into this larger picture of this human and just organic struggles that we have and challenges that we have, and using Bitcoin to as a tool, to essentially replace certain forms of war, because that's always going to exist. There's always going to be conflicts and challenges, but if we can replace, killing people with hashing more Bitcoin, that's a good thing. So yeah, Jason Lowry and I, as far as I know, we've spent some time at some of the same military bases and had some of the same military training. I'm definitely not going to put myself on his level. He's certainly spent a lot more time on this type of thing than I have, and he's had a lot more training than I have. But I think that I have a unique perspective on his viewpoints just because we have a similar background.
What do you think people get wrong about how the world works?
I think so. Just based off of what we were talking about through the lens of Softwar, people in general, at least around me, and this isn't unique to my specific circle. This isn't unique to Bitcoin, but people tend to not understand how. I'm trying to word this like in a way that
Yeah. Take your time.
that makes it make sense. But people don't realize how serious the world is. People don't realize that conflict exists 24/7 around us. We are sheltered from that. In the United States, that's where I'm from. I've got this cool shirt. Shout out Skyler, designer. He's got the
Is that the first
Genesis
block?
block here. Yeah,
Ah, cool.
on the American flag. Yeah. So
I love it.
I love my country. I certainly have my complaints and issues with the way that the government works, but my country is the sum of the people in the land that I'm from. It's not the bureaucrats. I'm anti-bureaucratic. So
Yeah.
for what
Amen
that's
to
worth,
that.
I'm a 1776 American. Right. So I'm a constitutionalist. But what I was trying to say is we live in a time and in a place where we have the luxury of not needing to think about war every day. There are places in the world where that's all they get to think about is war because it's on their doorstep. We have taken our war other places. And I certainly think Bitcoin is a great equalizer for that. I think that it will diminish the efficacy of war over time, and it makes war essentially more unaffordable. So that's why I think Bitcoin. That's where Bitcoin I think fits into this picture in one way. But to answer your question, I think people are just sheltered from the fact that war exists, and there needs to be some form of equalizer to allow us to compete with one another. Because if we don't have Bitcoin, or we don't have something like Bitcoin, then we have to exert our force in other manners, physical force, rather than hash force.
And not coming from the United States is an issue because not everybody has the Second Amendment. And we all know the Second Amendment is there for a reason. So I guess that's a good segue for something that I heard you say that I wanted to touch more upon, which is the liberation revolution. And for somebody in the West, I'm from Norway. Well, I grew up here, born and grew up here, but my parents are Latino. They left, an oppressive government, came here. I see what you're saying. Like, people here are, I won't say delusional, but we are in the shadows. And I like using that frog analogy, the boiling frog analogy. We struggle with that a lot here. And these are patterns that I've seen since I grew up and I was young, and we would just be not interested in things that I found important. So what does it mean for somebody who doesn't understand this, that they need to be liberated because they don't really know that we're trapped? And we're trapped in a monetary system that is working against us when we live in the most technologically advanced societies ever, which should result, thank you Jeff Booth, in things being cheaper, right? But they're not getting cheaper. We're getting more expensive. Our money isn't reaching to the extent that they used to. So what does it mean, liberation revolution?
Well, I think that what you just described is kind of the way I see things. I think for most of our history as humans, we have had this constant struggle of power, where we have a ruling class and we have the ruled, right? So we have this group of people that is completely subjected to the will of a ruler, right? So in Bitcoin we say rules without rulers, and that I think is a very liberating concept, because for most of our existence as humans, we've lived in this system where we've had this kind of two-tier or multi-tier system where somebody's at the top. And in most of the places on this earth, that is the case. And I would even argue, that's a big part of how we live in, the United States today under our government. I think it has way too much control and power. And I think this is the case everywhere, at least right now. I will say there was, in my opinion, one very clear deviation from that, and that was the American Revolution. And that's where the United States was born, and that's where we got, our Second Amendment. And I think that a lot of the freedoms that we have today, not just in the United States, but even worldwide, all come down to the fact that Americans have the right to bear arms. That keeps our government in check. And then I think there are some effects worldwide from that as well, too, because our government is much harder to corrupt. Simply because, if they try to do something that is, outside of the Overton window, something way over the top, we're going to stop them because we have the guns. And they know that. And so, granted, over time, they take, inch by inch of our freedoms away, but they can't make a big step all at once, right? They can't come in with a totalitarian government, take all of our guns, because we're going to shoot them if they do. So that's, I think, one great thing that I love about my country. I think it's really important for the world in general. And a lot of people are kind of oblivious to the fact that they are completely at the mercy of somebody else, their government.
Yeah.
Right. I think there, in a lot of countries all over the world. I don't actually know anything really about Norway, so I'll leave them out of this. But there are other, European countries that I'm a little bit more familiar with where we're just
Westerners. It's the same.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, it's the same. There's just their governments are trying to take freedoms every single day, and Bitcoin is the one thing that starts to give those freedoms back to us, in my opinion, because it's something that they can't control. And I think it's scaring them. I think we are starting to see some very visible signs that we are now in the stage that we like to call "then they fight you," using the Gandhi quote. So I think that Bitcoin is a tool for freedom. It's a tool for liberation, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people all around the world, including the United States, are frogs being boiled slowly.
Yeah. So true. I wanted to pull up a quote by Kevin Sorbo. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah.
If you let government take away your rights under the guise of an emergency, there will always be an emergency. And I think we're combating that. I think Bitcoin is a great tool for that, and I think guns is a good tool for that. I'm not saying use them anytime. I'm saying, if there is a socialistic government forming, something the blue team looked like they were going to do with Kamala, those guns come in handy if they're trying to take it away from you. Like we have seen this in history repeated times. Government takes away guns and then becomes incredibly oppressive. Like the pattern is there. And all we need to do is just read it to see it,
So one interesting thing, and I briefly kind of mentioned this and didn't give much to back it up, but I made this claim that the Second Amendment ultimately helps people in other countries too, and that might be kind of a foreign concept for non-Americans to understand. But let me give you one clear example.
Yeah, sure.
So in 2020, 2021, whenever the you remember the Canadian Freedom Convoy?
I think it was 2021.
Yeah, okay. So the Canadian Freedom Convoy, I think most people probably remember or know about it. If not, it was basically a protest in Canada of citizens protesting against their government for the shutdowns and the lockdowns and the travel restrictions. And so what they basically did is a lot of their truckers, they just lined up and basically bombarded their streets, right, in a peaceful protest, right? They just took their trucks to the street and they drove around and just put their trucks on the street. That's what they did. And then they honked and they did stuff like that. But all in all, it was a very peaceful protest. There was no violence involved. But the Canadian government lashed back at them pretty hard. So they shut down their bank accounts. They took their money. They froze their accounts. This is just one example of, the government being able to control you. And so what happened is Bitcoiners stepped up. Since these truckers were getting their bank accounts shut down and frozen, Bitcoiners were sending them Bitcoin. And so they were still able to, use money because they had Bitcoin. And it was making, like, on a world stage, a spectacle of the effectiveness of Bitcoin as an anti-state money. So the reason why this is important is because there's something else that happened that not a lot of people know about. As this was going on, in the United States, there was actually a similar movement that was starting. And on the day that people started to mobilize all over the country, we were going to have our own trucker protest in Washington, D.C., our capital. And I was actually watching this because they were coming through my state. I live in the middle of the country, and people were traveling on the interstate, next to where I live. And so the mobilization actually had started. The same day that the mobilization started in the United States, the Canadian government lifted their, they bent the knee, essentially. Okay, so they called it off, and they basically just said, okay, all this COVID stuff, we're going to just back off on it. So it stopped the American trucker protest and the Canadian trucker protest. It all stopped at the same day. But it wasn't until Americans got involved, because they know that once the Americans get involved, they're bringing their guns with them, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want this to turn into, a civil war, because we got the firepower to back it up. So anyway, that's my point, is the fact that we were able to take it, into our own hands, put the other governments in check. And it only would have been as successful here because we have the Second Amendment and because we are all heavily armed as citizens.
That's interesting. I never thought of it like that. I wonder if I could look back in any to any historical Norwegian revolts, or I guess we don't protest here. People are really passive, but I wonder if there's an example of that here. And I'm gonna write it down so I can look at it. I'll remember it. What's your thought on modern kings? Because I saw this video recently about Lena. Lena, it's not about her. She made it. Lena Saishi. I don't know how to say her last name, but the girl that's living in El Salvador, that's friends with the president of El Salvador.
Yeah.
Did you see her video? The recent video?
The one where she was presenting on the stage?
In the maybe she did that in that recent El Salvador event. I don't know.
Maybe I
if she
missed
did.
it. That's the last one I saw of her, where she was at the event. I don't remember what the event was called, but the national event where she
Yeah,
was talking about their country and the president.
yeah. What's your? She must have mentioned that. What's your thought on that?
Man, that's a hard one, and it's one that
Yeah,
I haven't completely. It's not a case that I've completely closed in my mind. Um, like I mentioned before, I'm a constitutionalist, right?
yeah. That's why I
I
wanted to ask.
Yeah, that's kind of my background and where I come from, and something that I think works long term. I think that monarchies can. I think they can work, and they potentially have a place. And I know that that's kind of something that some people might find abrasive. But I think the perfect example of that is kind of what we're seeing in El Salvador, right? We have the quote unquote dictator of El Salvador, President Bukele.
Yeah,
But he's an example of, if we want to call him a dictator, let's just say we can call him a dictator for whatever reason. People like to use that term. He is a good example of a dictator who has actually done good for the country. I think that it's a very objective stance to say that El Salvador is better today than it was 10, 15 years ago, right? It was a
yeah,
bad, scary place. And
yeah,
it's a safer place. They're more prosperous. Their people are more happy. Tourists are coming. They're building up their infrastructure to a tremendous degree, faster than probably anywhere else in the world. El Salvador is probably making more positive progress right now than any other country on earth. And why is that? It's because they have, a leader in place who's able to step up and make changes. Now, the reason why that's so much different is because in different forms of government, for example, the United States, we have a constitutional republic. In order for us to make changes, it takes a long time. And we have we have a big buffer between the citizens and the top tiers of the government, which isn't really necessarily supposed to be that way. I mean, the government is supposed to be comprised of representatives of the people. It's over time morphed into this other monster where it's basically just a monarchy with a bunch of different branches. So it's just a less efficient monarchy in the United States. So
Yeah.
I think over time, we've kind of devolved that way, and I don't know how you preserve, a republic or even any form of democracy long term. And a lot of people have speculated that all democracies eventually devolve into communism. I don't know how I haven't. I'm not an expert in political history. This is probably a conversation that you should have with Michael Saylor when he comes on your podcast. um,
Let's hope we will at one point in the future. No, I was just curious if you had seen it because she has a really great way to explain what the cycle is. I wish I remember the word, but
I will say I have one major concern. A lot of great things to say about the way that it's structured and the outcome. It's been very effective. But my main concern is what happens when President Bukele is gone. Right? So how do you preserve that long term? If there's right now, it's essentially more or less an administration built around one man, right? I think if you take Bukele out and you put somebody else in, a lot of that power structure is going to come with it. So,
yeah.
if you put an inferior man in that position, I think that a lot of that structure is going to follow, and that's my main
Yeah.
concern, is because now you've essentially created an opportunity for a totalitarian dictator to do things that they want to do in their will. I mean, the truth is, El Salvador is going in the direction that President Bukele wants, right? And I think most of us would agree these are all good things. But if he changed his mind or if somebody else gets put in that place, we could see, El Salvador going back to where it was before. So again, I don't know what the perfect government is. We've been trying to figure that out since we've been on this earth. I don't know if we're ever going to come up with something that's better than what we've already figured out. I'm a Christian. I think that the only true form of government is the one true King, Jesus Christ. I think he will be coming back to basically, rule over this earth once again in a very physical sense. And I think that I think people are just naturally drawn to try to fill that hole in their own lives. And, we see a very clear example of this through Scripture, multiple times even, but people long and desire to be ruled. And so, God's people are always asking for a king and a leader. And God gives it to us. He's basically like, hey, this isn't what you want. It's not what you really want, but I'll give it to you since you're asking. And it always ends up bad. So we always, I think just natural human nature is we want to serve somebody or something, and we're going to find something to fill that gap. And
I
for
just
me,
feel like that's so natural. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry for you.
I was going to say for me that I think the only way to really fill that gap is with Jesus, but other people come to other conclusions, and in my mind, it typically ends up, where back to, longing for corrupt kings.
It makes total sense to me also because I've been in a personal journey. We can get back to that. But just to touch on the modern kings I think it's a slippery slope. I think the example of Singapore is great, where Kuan Yu, I think was his last name, just took power so that he could actually rebuild it. He used power as a tool instead of an end goal, and built what Singapore is today. That's great. And he has a lasting, living, great legacy. Will that happen with Bukele? Who knows, right? It's hard to say. The only thing we can say is that the signs are there, and he seems like the guy that is using Kuan Yu as an example or as his role model. That's great. But again, it's all about vigilance for me. It's like, that it looks nice now, and it's great now, and we should celebrate it now, but stay vigilant, right? And when it comes to serving a king or an entity or a god or whatever, I think it's natural to want to seek that. I think it's in us that we want that. And the reason I believe that is because, we see, like, I remember being a kid and seeing around and be like, how did I get here? Like, it's a natural to try to figure that out. And that wasn't satisfied, at least for me, when I was a child. The Big Bang or God or the story of Jesus didn't make sense to me until this year, October. I can tell you that if you'd like, but it's something that I longed for. It's something that I wanted to feel. I wanted to understand what all of this is. Like, does it make sense that nothing collided with something and created everything? No, I don't believe in the Big Bang. I think that's there's no eyewitness accounts of that. So why would I believe that? It's not something that scientifically makes sense either, because scientifically, Jesus' story makes more sense, because somebody created the car, somebody built the building, somebody outside of the building had to build the building. So who built me, right? And that to me makes a lot more sense. And I read this book called More Than a Carpenter. That's the book that made it switch for me. I'm like, my family was Catholic all life. We went to church. My confirmation was in a Catholic church, but I never really connected with the story until I had a guy on the podcast that was a Christian. The reason I asked him on was because the values that I have and my future vision for my life aligns with those of Christians. So I was like, that's weird, that's strange, I'm not a Christian. Why is it this way? So I started asking people, like, what is it about them that makes me want to talk to them? So, or why are our values aligning? So I started to learn. I started to study, and it just made sense to me. Like, all those eyewitness accounts, all the stories of the world-renowned scientists, lawyers who also didn't believe in the story of Jesus Christ and said, "Hey, I'm the best scrutinizer in the world. I'm going to go out and finally put a finish to this thing called the Bible, called Christianity." And they're the best at researching, the best people at researching in the entire world. What happened to them when they tried to disprove the Bible and Christianity? They became Christians because there was no way for them to disprove it. There's too many signs that point to the fact that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So if they were converted, who am I to say that they're wrong, right? So that just made sense to me.
So one thing that I'll say on that is, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe. Here's the fact. There is only one truth. I'm not saying it's my truth. I'm just saying that the truth, that's the definition of truth. The definition of truth is there is only one. There's only one version of it. Everything else is not truth, right? So it's either truth or not truth. If Bitcoin is a part of that, if Bitcoin is truth, and that thesis and premise is correct, then as Bitcoiners, we tend to be more drawn to seek truth, in my opinion, and at least in my experience. So I actually put a poll out pretty recently. I just said, has Bitcoin brought you closer to Christ? That was it. Yes or no. 61% of the people said yes. And you know, I think that that's significant, right? So, you
Yeah.
know, we think about, you know, how many people uh, believe in Christ all over the world. You know, it's probably much less than 61%, but it is interesting that there's such a strong alignment between Bitcoin and Christianity. Um, and why is that? Um, I mean, I got a lot of comments, and I've obviously observed this over the years, but I think it all comes back to the point, and people say that it's because they start this journey of seeking truth, right? Something clicks
Yeah.
in their mind where they realize that everything's fake, right?
Yeah.
Everything is a psyop, and
Hmm.
once you start really critically thinking about things and with an open mind, you're able to approach things from a new perspective,
Yeah.
where you're not just going to listen to whatever somebody else says. You're actually going to figure it out on your own. And much like the history of Jesus and the Bible and Scripture itself, you know, these are all factually provable events. Bitcoin is very similar. Don't trust, verify. You can actually go and you can do the research yourself. You can look at the code and make sure that you can verify for yourself, and so you don't have to necessarily trust anybody. Now, I will say
Yeah.
there is an element, you know, of faith on the faith side, of course. So there is a difference there. But my point is it all comes back to a source of truth, and there is only one. Whatever it
Yeah.
is, there's only one.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you as well, which is why we or Christians align so much with Bitcoin, and what is the reason. And to me, it was I found Bitcoin many years prior to reading or believing the story of Jesus Christ. So it's it's a strange way to get there, and I had to go through a lot of spiritual searching and traveling the world and going to monk what are they called in English, enclosures? No, that sounds like a prison. um,
I don't know.
Monasteries,
Oh, okay, yeah,
um, energies and and stones and fucking spirituality stuff that I thought was the answer. Oh, okay, yeah, there's this consciousness energy, and all of that makes sense. Like there is a quantum physics part of this that none of us understand, not even the people that are in it.
yeah,
So what that is, it's just hard to wrap our head around. I mean, it's impossible to wrap our head around it. So I've found peace with that now. Like it was a long journey, and in the moment that it clicked for me, I just felt this peace, this calm, this worry inside of me that was just gone. And it was from one moment to another. I remember the day, October 7th, and I every time some sort of stress or worry comes up again, it's this brief moment of oh, I know what that is. I'll just pass it on. Just focus on what I need to focus on. Like I stopped ruminating on my worries. Stopped ruminating on that panicking feeling inside of me, and just life is just. I'm not saying it's like skyrocketing. It's not exponentially better, but it's definitely better. Like I'm not. There's this despair level of despair inside of me that's just gone, and it's so nice. It's really nice.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, thanks. Let's bring it back to Bitcoin for a second. I don't know how much time do you have there, for an hour or 2 hours or
Whatever, man.
okay. Nodes and spam and all that stuff. Are you paying attention to it?
Yes.
What's your take?
Oh man. Wow. How you say an hour, 2 hours? How much you got? How many days do you have?
Yeah, let's. I don't know. Let's put a benchmark for an hour, and then we'll take it from there.
I was just joking. Okay, so I'm gonna give like just my overall culminated thesis. This is my opinion on the matter. I don't like Core. I don't trust them. I don't think we should trust anybody. And So there's a lot of problems on the core side that I see from this idea of the centralization of the future of Bitcoin. So we have a group of people that are deciding on what Bitcoin is, and I think that that fundamentally is the problem. And that is a problem that the Knots crew isn't solving, right? So I'm not here to say like core is bad and Knots is good. I'm here. My point and my belief that I've come to at this point is I do not support the way core is doing things. I am essentially boycotting core. I want nothing to do with core. I'm personally running a Knots node right now, and it's not necessarily because I think that Knots is a perfect solution. It's because I hate core, and I don't mean that in a way that like is all encompassing. I hate very specific things about core. I hate the fact that they seem to be able to be manipulated through funding. I hate the fact that they are pushing updates through in general, but not just in general, but also specifically some updates that a lot of people don't agree with. And so my ultimate, right now, what I believe, and for the record, not a ton of people agree with me on this, but I am pro-ossification. What does that mean? I think that we should quit upgrading Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think we should stop changing Bitcoin. And what I see is I see two camps arguing about what changes are better for Bitcoin. Nobody that I see is arguing for us to just leave it alone. That's what I want. I want us to just leave Bitcoin alone. I want us to stop upgrading it. And I don't think that a lot of the economy around implementation, development, and maintenance is even necessary. I would personally prefer to not have developers or maintainers. I think we have everything we need to run the open source code for a very long time. Now, granted, they're going to continue to build and innovate and exist, and I think that's okay. Because, there might be some reason that we actually have to change Bitcoin. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't think the entire network needs to go along for that experiment.
Yeah.
So my belief is that we should ossify onto a very, any version. I mean, if you want a very specific recommendation, I would say we should ossify around core version 28. And the reason for that is just because it's been the longest running and most stable, and most people are on it, right? So most people are most familiar with core version 28 because based on the number of nodes, it has been the longest running with the most adoption. So that's my specific recommendation, and I honestly think that somebody should rebrand it so that it doesn't have the
core stamp.
Yeah, the stamp of core on it, right? I don't want that associated with the future of Bitcoin any longer. I think core has made fools of themselves, and they've destroyed their reputation, and they're in the process destroying the reputation of Bitcoin. I'm not saying we're there yet. Bitcoin's still great, and I mean, people are going to attack me for saying this, and they always have, and they always will. I don't think that there have been any changes, to the implementation or even the source code of Bitcoin at this point that have, made any major impact negatively. I mean, even this core version 30 with the opcode, the op return expansion, I don't think is a catastrophic detrimental change to Bitcoin. But again, that's not my problem. My problem is the obvious power and control that a small group of people has over the network. And the other argument that people are going to say is, well, you don't have to upgrade. Well, that is absolutely not, that's not an argument. I completely reject that premise, because what happens is core rolls out an update. Just by default, people are going to update their nodes, right? So when there's a new version of core and somebody new comes in or somebody just updates their node, they're just going to do it, right? And I know that that's not ideal, right? People should be scrutinizing every single update that comes through their node, but they don't. Core knows that, and they're just going to push forward anyway. So I think
Yeah.
that the onus is on Core to just, I don't know, go away. I
I
think
agree
that's
with
the
you.
solution. The
I
solution is they just
absolutely,
need to go away.
yeah, the way that they have handled the situation is not according to what the community wanted. It's proof in from the moment that they decided to roll out this, I don't know what they call it, but this update that was going to be released in the future, which is Core 30. The response to that was not positive. That should have been there. I don't know, hey, let's back off or let's change it. What is it that they're not liking? They were unwilling to even communicate or discuss with the community. And that to me was the first sign of, okay, these guys are either, I don't know if they're compromised or somebody's paying them, whatever. It doesn't matter really. What they are showing is enough for me to say these people shouldn't have anything to do with the maintenance of Bitcoin.
Well, they are absolutely compromised. This isn't a theory, right? This is true. Like, they are paid. So the question is, are they compromised in a way that benefits Bitcoin or benefits you, or are they compromised in a way that is detrimental? That's the question. So again, I think the only way to fix that is to not have developers and maintainers that are compromised. We just don't pay people to change Bitcoin. Right now, the incentive structure is people are literally building their entire lives and their income and their
Yeah,
livelihood around needing to change Bitcoin. That's a
yeah,
broken incentive structure. So
yeah,
you're now a solution looking for a problem,
yeah.
and that's not what we want our money to be.
I agree with you, and it's an interesting um, pattern that I'm seeing because in the beginning, as I was saying, they're not interested in communicating or in discussing, and then they just roll it out. Now there's more and more spam, and now I feel like the narrative. There are some accounts that I've seen that are engaging with my comments and content, at least, that are saying, "Oh, now Bitcoin is useless because it's a file storage thing." And I feel like this is all just playing out in such a, like, there's the attacker. I feel like the attacker is just have all the pieces in place. They understand what they're doing. At least that's what it feels like for me. There's somebody out there that, as we were talking about earlier, that really doesn't like that Bitcoin is what it is. They are not the system that they have gotten used to, or that they manage to, I don't know, profit from, is being attacked. It makes sense that they are trying to destroy Bitcoin. It really does make sense. I understand it from that same, survival mode, human nature point of view.
I want to also say, and I don't want to be like this alarmist person, because I feel like that's going on right now. Like, I don't know, fear mongering, so to speak. I mean, I've been called a fear monger for saying things like this, but I want to just real quick point out one thing that I think is worth at least talking about. It seems to be very clear at this point that there was a coordinated attack against Bitcoin from the system, right? The system meaning like the traditional, we'll just call them the central
Legacy
bankers,
system.
right? The central bankers are attacking Bitcoin today, right? And the interesting thing is that this attack seemed to all come down to a very specific date when everything seemed to kind of converge, and that was October 10th.
Mm.
And I've seen, a lot of reports about the series of events that have happened with JP Morgan, and the strategy stuff, as well as a lot of other things, with the MSCI index group and all of that. And there's just a lot of things that happen, but a lot of this seemed to happen and converge on this very specific date of October 10th. The one thing that people tend to ignore is that it also happens to be the same day that core version 30 was released to the public. So, I'm not saying that this is absolutely 100%, related. It is just a coincidence that's worth noting.
It's just a pattern that you're seeing.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you said about the thing that knots doesn't solve, and that's the fact that there's a small group of people that are in charge, I guess, or that are prioritized to maintain or to be Bitcoin developers. Because knots is like Luke Dasher and Mechanic, and I don't know, maybe a handful more people. And I haven't thought about it that way, but if we're gonna judge strictly out of how I, or how I experience those people, how I see them, and how they express themselves, and how they talk, and what are the words they use, I am naturally drawn to Mechanic. I'm naturally drawn to Matthew Cratter, to Luke, to Datham Om, in the way that they speak, in the way that they write, in the way that they express themselves. In the conferences, in those recorded conferences, I don't know if you've seen them, these panels where they are discussing back in May, like the way that I see the core developers, they're really like, there aren't people that I would walk up to after that panel and say, hey, what you said there, like, I'm not drawn to that at all. Like, I'd rather talk to Mechanic. I'd rather talk to Matthew. And that's one thing. I agree with you. They don't solve the fact that they're still people, and there's still just a group of them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you're saying that you don't want to continue, or like we don't need to change Bitcoin anymore. I agree with that. And we should only converge when we need it. When, I don't know, quantum computers, if that ever becomes a problem, we should fix that. Like we all agree that we don't want that to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that would be the most, I don't know, pressing. It's not even pressing because it's so far into the future. The thing with the quantum computers, that it's not a problem now. But I agree with you, and I think Saylor agrees with you as well. I think I've heard him say that, like, stop changing it, like leave it as it is.
Yeah. So I got a couple things on that. So one thing that I know for sure is, I'm in my house right now. I know for sure at one point this house isn't going to be here. It'll collapse, it'll burn down, someone will demolish it. I don't know. Could be 100 years from now, 200, whatever. Could be 50 years from now, who knows. But I know for sure that day's coming. And so using that as an analogy for quantum computing, let's just say we're certain that quantum, a quantum attack is coming to Bitcoin, right? I'm not going to leave my house today because I know at some point in the future, at an unknown date, this house is coming down. I'm not just going to go ahead and pack my family up and move and go somewhere else and say that the reason is because, well, this house is going to come down someday. See how crazy that sounds? Like, okay, quantum computing might be coming, or, quantum attacks might be coming to Bitcoin. And at that point, we're going to fix it, right? At that point, we're going to have a reason to convince everybody to upgrade, right? We don't need to make these changes right now, today.
True.
For a problem that is so far into the future, we don't even know if or when it's coming in our lifetimes, if ever. Maybe 1,000 years from now, somebody has found a way to preserve this house and it never comes down. But I'm not going to change my life, change my entire foundation, just because I have this understanding that someday there might be a problem, and I don't know when, right? So if I knew, on a specific date or something like that, that would definitely change things. But it's very unknown, right, of when it's going to happen. So anyway, that's my analogy for that. It's with quantum computing. If it's coming, or I keep saying quantum computing, I'm just saying quantum attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if that's coming to Bitcoin, we're gonna have solutions for it. And by the way,
I think so too.
Bitcoin is not going to be the first thing to fall with quantum attacks. So when these quantum attacks start, we are going to have a lot of time to plan for this. Okay.
Yep.
So when quantum starts, when it gets here and it's a serious problem, we already have people working on this, which is great. So we could already hard fork Bitcoin to a quantum resistant algorithm, which is
Yeah.
fine. We could do that right now. I don't think we should. I'm just saying we have those tools already in place to save us, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should change Bitcoin at all until it's absolutely necessary. And when that day comes, guess what? I'll raise my hand. I'll be like, okay, let's upgrade. Because
Yeah.
if I don't upgrade my node, I'm gonna be or hard fork. Let's just say it's a complete hard fork, right? If I don't hard fork my node, then I'm gonna lose everything. So I don't have a choice. I'm gonna move over to this new chain.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And miners will be forced to do the same because they won't get the block reward.
exactly. Yeah.
So that
So
makes,
yeah,
yeah.
you're right.
Let's I want to talk a little bit about we're gonna backtrack a little bit to my supposed target audience.
Sorry, I probably took
About
you way off course.
I like it that way. Honestly, too much structure to me. I feel like I'm in prison, so this is good. When somebody asks you, like they're completely new to everything that has to do with Bitcoin, like what's your definition of what Bitcoin is? Like somebody asks you, what is Bitcoin? What's your like 2 sentence description? Or I guess your 2 minute description. I don't know.
Bitcoin is, I to boil it down into like one sentence, I would say, or one statement, I would say Bitcoin is consensus. That's what it
Mm.
is. And it has that statement has many implications. But the cool thing is, I think Bitcoin can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to the fact of consensus, right? So, whatever that consensus can mean to you could be different. For some people, I'll say, I don't agree with this, but some people use it as a file storage system for NFTs and stuff, right? Um, Personally, I'm in the camp where if you're using Bitcoin according to the rules that have been set and agreed upon, again, back to consensus. We're defining consensus here. If you're behaving within the consensus, it's a valid transaction. And so, the knots people are going to hate me for saying that. The core people are going to hate me for saying all the things that I've said. Nobody likes me. That's okay. I don't need to be liked. But that's my belief. So, with that said, I think the majority of people in Bitcoin today see Bitcoin as money, and I'm one of them, right? So I think Bitcoin is a monetary network that is outside of the control and purview of the state. So we've had many different types of money throughout our existence. Most recently, we're familiar with the form of money called fiat, which is money that is produced and controlled by the state, the government. And that's not real money, right? Because you've taken most of the qualities that make money out and just replaced it with nothing. And so it's a facade. And the cracks are starting to show, if I'm putting it lightly. Things are, that can't go on forever. We've seen this over and over and over again once you separate real money from what you pretend is money. And this essentially has been the story of the last 100 or 200 years of countries that are essentially giving out something that they're calling money that really isn't money. So by that, I mean, let's just say that, gold is money. I think gold is money. I don't think it's a great money, but it is money. And so you take your money and you put it in a bank and they give you a note. That note is not money. It's currency. People call it money. It's not really money because it doesn't have the qualities that make it so. And so what that does over time is it erodes the value of the underlying, or of the note itself. So the currency, the value of that currency erodes. and it causes lots and lots of problems. I mean, I don't need to have time to get into all of that today, but if you want to do a history of any currency, they all tend to converge on this same path of collapse. And today we're going through a collapse of the biggest, most pervasive currency that the world has ever known, which is the US dollar. Again, there's only one inevitable outcome once you separate money from fiat, right? I don't think fiat is a real money again. So, what is Bitcoin? It is money. It is the underlying asset. It is also the currency that sits on top of it. It's the first time we've been able to, at scale, save and transact in a money efficiently, effectively, without diminishing any of the properties of what money needs to be. So all three functions of money can now be performed effectively with Bitcoin. You've got the store of value, you've got the unit of account, and the medium of exchange. And medium of exchange is primarily where I focus on, because I think it's the area that has the most room for improvement for us. We have a lot of people who like to buy Bitcoin and hold it, and they see it as like this investment, which, by the way, it's a great investment. But that's only one very small aspect of what Bitcoin is and what it can do. If you take the medium of account aspect out of Bitcoin, meaning the transactional aspect of it, the peer-to-peer digital cash system, if you remove that from Bitcoin, then the unit of account goes away too. It's got no value. And so if everybody just held Bitcoin in their ETFs and their treasury companies, there would be no point to Bitcoin at all. So we have to take custody of it, and we need to use it as money. We have to transact in it. We have to use it as currency. Buy things, sell things. The more we can do that, the more we can opt out of the fiat system, the more we can opt out of the government control over our financial lives.
If somebody wants to study money, where do you point them?
Well, I'll say I have been reading a book. I just finished it yesterday, actually. I really enjoyed it. It's called Moral Money by Eric Sammons. It was really good. I don't think it's perfect, and just with any book, there's always things where I'm like, I would have said that a little bit differently. But this book specifically is one where, as it goes through, I'm always like, man, this guy, he said it just how I wish I could say it, right? It's like this thought that I struggle to get out to people sometimes, but he just puts it down in such a great, easy to understand way that is also, for the most part, on point. And so it helps people understand really complex topics in Bitcoin very simply. And I think the root of, or I guess the main theme of the book is morality, and how Bitcoin is a more moral money than fiat, which I think is a cool, I think it's an important aspect of Bitcoin. So that's where I would point people right now. If you're anywhere on your Bitcoin journey, whether you're just starting, you don't know anything about it, or you've been in it for a while, I think Moral Money is a cool book. I would recommend it.
In the beginning of the show, let's round out with this. In the beginning of the show, you said a sentence that ended with some sly roundabout way. Who was it that said that again?
Friedrich Hayek.
Friedrich Hayek, that's right. Yeah, when I saw that, I said that's the first Bitcoiner we ever had. That wasn't that in the 80s?
When was that? I think it was early 84, yep.
That's crazy. Isn't that just crazy? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of the government. That is, we can't take it violently out of the hands of the government. All we can do is, by some sly roundabout way, introduce something that they can't stop.
That's a good way to put a wrapper on it, my friend.
That's Bitcoin.
I love it, man. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, Felipe. Have a good one.
For sure.